Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. And this week we are going to be talking about books that should be made into movies. And as we're talking, the books that we're talking about will appear on the screen, and it will also tell you the various formats that they are available in through the Monroe County Library system. You can always call your local branch of the library and talk to one of the librarians there and let them know what the title is that you want to get your hands on, and they will let you know how to do that. If you want to do it on your own, you can request through our online catalog. That web address is on your screen right now, and that would be for physical versions of these titles: hardcovers, paperbacks, audiobooks on CD, large print. If you see one of the titles is available in a digital format, you would need to go to that application. So we have three currently. We have Overdrive, and the app for Overdrive is called Libby, but those are the same thing. So if you see Overdrive listed, the Overdrive offers downloadable ebooks and audiobooks. Hoopla offers downloadable ebooks, audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And finally, we have RB Digital, but just a special note about RB Digital, they were recently bought out by Overdrive. And so RB Digital downloadable audiobooks will only be available until September 23rd. After September 23rd, check for those titles on Overdrive or on the Libby app. RB Digital will still be available for magazines, week-long passes to Acorn TV, and the great courses for a period of time. But starting on September 23rd, all of their downloadable audiobooks are moving over to the Overdrive app. So be aware of that. Good to know. That's how you can get your hands on these titles. And now I'm going to introduce who's with us this week. I'm Jennifer Herneski, and I'm the branch librarian at the Dundee Branch Library. And our introductory question for this week is, what is your favorite book to movie adaptation? And for me, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to do two. The first one is for one that I have actually read the book, Anne of Green Gables. If you've watched these before, you know I love Anne of Green Gables. And I love the version that came out in the 80s with Megan Follows and Jonathan Crombie. Any other version, nope, not going to do it. Not going to do it. It's got to be Megan Follows, Jonathan Crombie. Get your hands on that one, and it was released as like a television mini-series on PBS. So it's, like 4 hours long. It's worth every moment of it. So that's one. And then the other one is for one where I haven't read the book, but the movie's amazing, and that's The Princess Bride. Because The Princess Bride is based on William Golding's book, and it's an amazing movie, but I've never actually read the book, so I don't know if the book is as amazing. But if you haven't seen The Princess Bride and you need adventure and knights and princesses and laughter and sword fights in your life, you need to go see The Princess Bride. So those are my two. Also with us this week, we have Kristen Brown, who is a reference librarian at the Bedford branch. And what's your favorite book to movie adaptation, Kristen? You're muted.
Okay, I think I'm good now. So this was kind of a tricky one for me because I noticed that I either read the book first and was afraid to watch the movie because I didn't know if it would be good enough, or I watched the movie and haven't read the book yet. So I had a hard time with this one, but I'm gonna pick the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley. So that's the one I'm going to go with. I could watch that movie. In fact, I think I have watched that movie every day for like a week straight. I've watched it. I watched it with my aunt. My mom and I love it. Like, it's just one of those movies that I could sit down and just get lost in. I really enjoy it. It's been a really long time since I've read Pride and Prejudice, so I feel like it's close to it, but I don't even remember if it's exactly like that. But I mean, for the general storyline, it's kind of hard to mess up Mr. Darcy, and so that's my choice.
Nice. Thanks, Kristen. Also with us this week, we have Bonnie Jennings, and Bonnie is a retired school librarian and is currently a front desk clerk at the Dundee Branch Library. And what is your favorite book to movie adaptation, Bonnie?
Well, I got to do two like you did. The Help, I thought, was a wonderful book, and they did a really good job of replicating that. And then the other one was Gone Girl. And I'm glad I read the book because I went with my husband who had not read the book. And the movie theater was so packed, we could not sit together. So I remember walking up, from my seat, and he is sitting there with his eyes just bugging out saying, "Why didn't you tell me?" And so it was interesting to see what a shock it was to someone who had never read the book. So it made it even better for me.
That makes me laugh because Mike and I went and saw Gone Girl on our anniversary one year.
Oh.
And that was the movie that we picked because nothing says anniversary like Gone Girl. And I had read the book, so I knew what to expect. And then at the end of the movie, he kind of looked at me like, "And you still picked this?" Yeah, it's got everything.
Yeah.
Great for celebrating love.
Oh, The Help was such a good pick. I completely forgot about The Help. That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. And we also have with us this week Jen McCarty, who is a reference librarian at our Ellis branch. And what is your favorite book to movie adaptation?
So, little behind the scenes trivia for anybody who's been paying attention to our literary libations. Jennifer gives us these questions in advance, and every week I forget to come up with an answer until right beforehand. So that's your little trivia for me. And as we've been sitting here, I had a movie in mind, and like more keep popping up. So I'm going to cheat and go with two as well. And both of mine are kind of nerdy because that's how I roll. Number one, this is the one I immediately thought of when I decided to actually answer the question. Lord of the Rings. I mean,
right? I know.
Lord
of the Rings,
Lord of the Rings.
Potter, right?
I don't need to say any more than that. But the other one, and it just has a special place in my heart, and it's so nerdy and so long. Hamlet, specifically the Kenneth Branagh version. It's from the 90s. It's like 4 hours long. I have it somewhere on VHS, and it's in 2 VHS tapes because it's that long and it's that old.
And you still keep it for nostalgia.
Exactly. It's such an incredible adaptation, though. Like, if you're, I love Shakespeare, but I feel like it's one of those things that people who say, "Oh, I don't like Shakespeare," need to see it. And most movies, don't necessarily do it justice. But that one is so, he didn't cut anything from the text, and it's long, but it's got all the Shakespeare meatiness translated so well to a movie I just love it. I just love that particular version, Kenneth Branagh version of Hamlet. It's incredible.
I'm going to ask a foolish question because I know he directs. Is he in that one too?
He plays Hamlet.
Okay.
Plays Hamlet.
I don't know that I've seen that, which shocks me because I love me some Kenneth Branagh.
It's so good. And it's also a little bit funny because, like, there's Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, and oh gosh, I can't remember who all of the other people are, but I remember there's a lot of little cameos. One of the gravediggers is Billy Crystal. One of the guards my dog is barking. One of the guards is Robin Williams.
How have I not known this? Yeah. I'm gonna have to go find out if it's streaming anywhere.
So good. And yeah, there's a lot of little like people that you go, really? This is happening? So good.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jen. Now I got a movie to add to my list as well as a bunch of books.
It's a long one, but it's so good.
Well, to get all of Shakespeare in, it's always long anyhow. You got to get it all in here. Well, thank you. And to get us started this week on books that should be made into movies, let's have Kristen share hers.
Man, that mute's going to get me every time. All right, so the first book that I'm going to go with, I've been just waiting to talk about this book. I read this book and I downloaded it on Overdrive, and it was just a book that I found on Instagram. Somebody that I was following suggested it, and I didn't even listen to her review or anything. I just looked at the cover and I was like, ooh, I like this cover. And then once I looked up what it was about, I was like, ooh, this could be really interesting. So what this book is about. So this book would be great as a movie because it's one of those books that jump in time. So the book is the debut novel of Afia, I feel like I'm gonna pronounce her last name wrong, Atakora, which I think she pronounces it a little bit different, but this is her debut novel, and it's based around 3 women, and it's set in the Civil War era, and so it jumps between before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and after, and it follows this lineage of women. So you have, I don't want to get anything wrong on this, which is why I wrote notes. So you have the main character, and you begin the book with her being the midwife, or the hoodoo woman of the village, right? And so the village are just the slaves that stayed at the plantation after the Civil War. Like, they didn't really have anywhere else to go, and so it's still this community. They still are doing the things that they, they're still working. They still are a community. So she is kind of the midwife, the holy woman, whatever. She took over for her mother. Through the book, you get an idea of the kind of woman that her mother was, and her mother was the kind of person that always knew the answer. She had this like really magical way of just knowing what to do at that time. And so the main character, she has to grapple with that in the present time, because a situation arrives where a child is born, and it's almost like he's a bad omen. So they talk about like his eyes are black, his skin is a different color, and the community starts to kind of turn on her because they're thinking, okay, well, you must not have all the answers. What's going on with this? It's like a very supernatural thing that they connect it with. And so so they have that story. So you have the main character, she's like she took over for her mother. The beginning part, it talks about her mother on the plantation and how they all grew up during the slavery. The main character, which of course I didn't write that down because I was like, I know what her name is, and now I can't think of it, and I don't have the book in front of me. What was the little sister's name in the Hunger Games? Who was killed? Or no, not the little sister. She was the one who she took under her wing. She has the same name.
Oh, Rue?
Rue. Something, it's close to Rue, because I always associated those 2 names together. So Rue develops a special relationship with the plantation owner's daughter, right? So you have, I'm trying to explain it in a way that's not making it confusing. It would be an amazing book because there's so many elements to this story. It's very character driven, and it's a really unique storyline for the Civil War. I feel like that is something that's told continually from one vantage point, and it really talks about the relationships between, a plantation owner's daughter and Rue, who was a slave, and how they grew up together as friends. And so neither one of them at that age really understood what that meant. And then as they grow together in their relationship, they realize how different their worlds are, and the things that they can accomplish and the things that they will never get to do. So I feel like any book that has a crazy storyline like that, but I can still imagine it in my head, should be made into a movie. Also, I know there's people out there that are going to listen to me and think, I don't know what she's talking about. This book sounds so confusing. So if it sounds confusing, hopefully this gets made into a movie because it was written so well. This is the only book I can remember stopping and just rereading sentences because they were just so well written. Like, there were so many times where I was like, wow, that was a perfect way of writing that. Like, it gives me goosebumps just talking about it right now. She's a phenomenal writer. And it's just a really relevant story today. She said that while she was writing it, a lot of what was happening with Black Lives Matter was coming to fruition, and everything that was happening with the racial injustice in our country. And so to connect that with, a Civil War era book and to still bring out those elements was pretty amazing. And she did a lot of research into like slave journals, and she talked to a lot of medical professionals because it deals a lot with midwife and medical herbal, things like that. So great book. Hopefully I didn't scare anybody away with my crazy. I was so prepared. Look at these notes.
I would go and see
but
that
I still
movie.
didn't.
If they turn Conjure Women into a movie, Kristen, I will go and see it.
It's so good. Like I said, I've been waiting for that book to come out because it's such a good book. My second book we've already talked about on here, but and actually, Jen, you were the one that talked about it, but Night Circus, it's got to be made into a movie. The way that Erin Morgenstern writes is ridiculous. And what I've noticed with Night Circus is people either were sucked into it and they absolutely loved it, or they couldn't make it past the beginning part because there is so much description and so much detail. And so I feel like there's so many people who are missing out on the just magic that is this book. And if it were made into a movie, it's easy access, which after doing research, the rights have been purchased by Summit Entertainment, and Jeremy Jasper, who I'm not really familiar with, but he is going to be the director. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we will be able to see this on the screen. But I picture this book being fun to do as a film because of the cinematography that you could do. There's these characters in the book that are called reveres, and they wear all black and white, and they wear these red scarves, and they are like the die-hard Night Circus fans. And every time I read that book, I just get this vivid image of all these reveres walking around the Night Circus, and I just feel like you could do a lot of stuff with that. I really wish that Tim Burton would be the one to direct this, because I mean, his palette, I feel like he could totally go in like a Big Fish or a Miss Peregrine's School of Peculiar Children kind of movie way. It would be, yeah. So if you haven't already, this is twice that we're talking about the Night Circus. And this is like the perfect season, I feel like, to read the Night Circus. It's always like a fall, winter kind of book for me. So those are my two.
That one for me, like I felt so transported. So anytime I hear it talking about it being made a movie, I'm like, I want to see it, but there's so much that could go wrong. And especially since like reading it really gives you this feeling of like being totally in it. So like if a movie doesn't do that, I'm going to be upset.
I'm a little disappointed that it didn't say anything about Erin Morgenstern being directly involved in it. I feel like I would only be comfortable if she were right there to say like, nope, that's not how I pictured that, or yep, this is the way that I wanted this to go.
I think that's always dicey because like Twilight, I'll admit, I like the Twilight books. I'm gonna say it. And I think Stephanie Meyer was so involved. Like sometimes I think when the authors get involved, it like hurts it a little bit. But at the same time, like it's their babies, so I get it.
Right, and you want a little artistic freedom because it is, you know, you're transferring over from one medium to another. You know, artistic license needs to be present. It's tricky.
It is.
But I'm excited and a little scared also.
And I'm glad that we can, you know, talk about it and nitpick it without having to do it because.
Yeah, I don't want to be involved in this.
I do think it would make an amazing movie or an amazing like 6-episode television series, because it would give them more time, because there's so much world building. Personally, I feel somebody who has a lot of money should turn it into an amusement park for me. Like a full amusement park Night Circus land.
Oh,
I would go so that I can go and pretend to walk through it.
Jennifer, that's genius.
I know. If only I had, you know.
I know. I don't have any money. So any entrepreneurs out there?
That's right. All the literary folks would come to your amusement park.
Yes. Take my money.
Yes. Thank you, Kristen. Let's have Bonnie share her books that should be made into movies.
All right. Well, the first one is These Is My Words by Sarah Prine, or about Sarah Prine. It's actually written by Nancy Turner, who's the great-granddaughter of Sarah Prine. And it's written as her diary. And the cool thing about the book is she is practically illiterate at the beginning, and the writing shows it. And then she progresses, and the story is just outstanding. It takes place in 1881, the whole family. She's 17 when the family decides that they're going to go from the Mexico territory into Texas, and it is one tragedy after another. Her little sister has died before they even leave, so you just hear about her, and then she's got 4 brothers. Well, along the way, one brother gets a snake bite, he dies. Another one loses a leg that they have to amputate. No anesthesia, so it was brutal for those people. But Sarah she's strong. She's good with the rifle. They have Indian attacks. They had at the beginning, after looking back through the book, I had forgotten there was some outlaws that brutalize a child, and not to give the whole story away, but I had forgotten she kills them, and an Indian comes and scalps them for her. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that would really make for a lot of action in the movie. But there's just her whole character. I could just see her through the whole story, just growing from a strong young woman to an older woman. And her dad dies, so and her mom is just like living like a ghost. She's just probably just in a state of depression. So Sarah just takes charge of the whole family and everything they're going to do. And so as they're going and they finally get to where they need to go, and along the way they meet a army captain that guides them, who's named Jack Elliott. And I remember in Jennifer's book club and in my book club, we both read it, and everyone said, oh, Jack Elliott should be Sam Elliott. I don't know if we thought that just because of the name, but he would be perfect for this army captain who you could tell he just is so fascinated by Sarah and loves her from day one. And she thinks he's bossy and ornery and, trying to make her, lead her life, and she's not going to have it. So like any good movie then, instead of going with Jack, that would be the good choice. No, she sends a letter to this kid that grew up with her family because his parents had died, and they're going to start a ranch. And Jimmy, would you want to come and do the ranch with us? Well, Jimmy marries her, but all along he's loved somebody else who rejected him, and he's a jerk. And they have a child, but luckily for the story, Jimmy dies and Jack comes back in the scene. So, and it was just like, oh yes, her and Jack are together and they build a wonderful life, and she's strong enough to hold down the fort while he's on his army business. And it just, everything goes along. And I could just picture the scenery, they have a ranch, but they're going to move into town because he's done with the army and he becomes a fire chief. And it seems just so perfect, but no, it's not. And the new city hall with the paint still in the building catches fire, and Jack, hero that he always has been, thinks he hears a baby inside, and it's really the paint cans hissing. And so Jack is a hero and goes in, and he's badly burned. And apparently this, is all factual. And back then, even now, probably he would not have survived, but they call in the children to see him. I mean, it just ends so nicely, even though, he's dead. But I don't want to give away the whole story, but it ends nicely.
I was going to say, I'm not sure. I think your definition of nice, Bonnie, and my definition of nice might be different, but each their own.
Maybe you want to take this on your next anniversary if they make it into a movie. But even though, it's part of life, and she just carries on and decides she's not staying in town. She's going back to the ranch. The sons go with her, the daughter from Jimmy. She's a problem and she's going to stay in town, which that's probably best for all of them. But they didn't bring the coffins back to the ranch. I mean, I could just see that whole thing. Everybody in the theater is just crying. But she looks out at the end in the book, and she knows she's going to be okay. And since I read that book and then reread parts of it, just trying to remember, there's a lot I didn't even remember. They probably could not put it all in a movie, but the scenery alone would be worth it. And Jack, and I pictured Jennifer Lawrence maybe, or Anne Hathaway as being Sarah, starting out pretty rough, and then and there's funniness in it too when she goes to the bank, you know, and back then women didn't, you know, do anything with money, and just her exchange with the banker, she puts him in his place. She's got a real snooty sister-in-law. She puts her in her place. I mean, she's just to me a perfect character to be the, you know, Academy Award winner someday. So we'll see. And the other one
is really good for that one too,
So
because
what?
the audiobook, the
Oh.
actress that does the audiobook does a fabulous job. And if you end
Oh.
up liking Sarah Prine, there's 3 more books with her in it.
Yes.
There's 2 that are part of the trilogy. And then just recently, when I talked about this book last time, I went out and looked up Nancy Turner and discovered that she's released a 4th book about Sarah Prine's niece. So if you like Western action adventure, grown-up Laura Ingalls Wilder,
Yeah.
check out these books. They're so good, and they would make really great movies.
Yes. Yeah. So the other one is more, it's a J book. It's for children, but there was so much in it that, especially today, is good for kids to think about it. And that one is called Jip, His Story by Catherine Patterson. And she's had 2 of her books, Bridge to Terabithia and The Great Gilly Hopkins. Was that her name? Yeah, Great Gilly Hopkins, which I didn't realize that had been made into a movie with Kathy Bates and Glenn Close and Octavia Spencer. I bet that is excellent. I'll have to look at that. But her story about Jip takes place in the 1860s, before the Civil War, in Vermont, of all places. But this little boy, Jip, who has fallen off of a wagon. He's a toddler. He doesn't know his age. And he's fallen off a wagon. Nobody claims him. This is back in the 1800s, 1860s. There weren't child services, so no one claims him. Nobody in town wanted him because he looks darker. They think he fell off a gypsy wagon, so they name him Jip. And so he's sent to a poor farm where the people in town that are mentally ill or physically disabled or just with one problem after another and take care of themselves, they live here. And they do work to try to, you know, earn money to pay for this poor farm because the taxpayers are always complaining about, you know, these people we're spending money on and they need to do something. So Jip, since he's not mentally ill, even though he's young, he's given a lot of responsibility on the poor farm. One of the things he's responsible of is this huge man that is like a boy named Sheldon. And Sheldon is as strong as a horse, very compliant. And so he's basically does whatever Jip or anyone else tell him to do. He just seemed like just the nicest man and wanting to do good. And he is sent to work in like a stone quarry because of his strength. He can do so much. And Jip is worried about him from the beginning because Sheldon will do what anyone tells him, and he is taken advantage of by, you know, meaner people. So he's working there, and another family in town with an alcoholic husband who dies in the cold. They are destitute, so they're sent to the poor farm to. So the mom tries to help with the children, and it's discovered that this poor farm has all these kids that aren't going to school. And the lady who came to help, her daughter's going to go, and they have to have someone to walk with her. So Jip is given that, and Jip is extremely intelligent, and the teacher there recognizes it and really takes an interest in Jip, and he keeps walking her to school. She gives him a Bible and a book about the Underground Railroad, which you don't know at this time. After reading it, you see why the author is putting this Underground Railroad in. And there's these bullies in school because the kids are from a poor farm, and Jip is a little darker, and maybe he's a gypsy. These bullies are there at school, and the teacher's trying to deal with that. And so he takes these books and he's reading them, and he finds out that the teacher's boyfriend is a Quaker. And so all this starts to come together at the end. But before that happens, I almost forgot. A lunatic comes, and that's what they call him the whole time. The lunatic comes to town. It's a man who he's just crazy. His hair is wild. He hasn't been bathed. He's got sores on his arms. He's been shackled for so long, and they keep him in a cage. He rants and raves, but then he has moments where he becomes calm, and he's intelligent, and he knows when his episodes are coming on. So Putt is his name. Putnam is his real name, but he goes by Putt, and Jip just takes him under his wing. It is just very touching that this old crazy man who realizes when an episode's going to come on, he wants Jip to cage him up because he gets violent, can't take care of himself. But in the off time, Jip cleans him up, gets his hair combed and cut, and he becomes like a mentor to Jip because he knows Jip has potential, and doesn't matter that Jip feels like he's just nobody wanted him. They just dumped him off a wagon. And Putt's also very religious. So Putt sings this hymn all the time. And I listened to the audio. So that alone made me think, oh, this guy should be in the movies, because it was just, every time things got down, he always sang all is well. So in the meantime, poor Sheldon, I got off track, but I'm sorry. I do have notes too, Kristen, but it got a little disjointed there.
Then you start talking and the notes don't really do.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
yeah.
You're doing great.
Well, he's going back and forth to school, and this man starts hanging around and looking at him and asking about him and telling him when he gets him alone, I do know who your dad is and I can take you to him. And Jip just knows something's not right, and Putt knows the same thing. So while all this drama with the stranger comes, and he pays these bullies at school, the Braxton brothers, who are real jerks, to keep an eye on Jip because you might have some money involved here. And meanwhile, Sheldon doesn't end well at the mine, and Putt's off and on with his there's some type of mental illness, and that was kind of what the book was about also. That's what they did with people back then that were lunatics. They just would lock them into cages. So Putt Jip finds out this man is after him, and he sees him. He and Putt see this man that keeps trying to track after Jip, and he looks a lot like Jip, this stranger, this white man. Well, as the story goes on, and Putt says, you need to get out of here. You need to leave. And Jip's not going to leave without Putt. But they know that this man is up to no good. He's trying to get Jip every chance he can. And they take off kind of for the woods, and he does not want to leave Putt because he knows he's going to be caged constantly if he's not there to let him out once in a while. So as the story goes on, and this has some very sad parts that would make, this sounds odd, a good family movie because there's so much love in there in between the terrible things that happen. And the teacher's boyfriend, that is the Quaker, is part of the Underground Railroad system. And the man after him is a slave catcher because Gyp is not a gypsy. He is the son of the slave owner's mom. So his mom didn't just shove him off of a wagon. She dropped him off because she was going to be captured again, and she didn't want him to be a slave. This was before the Civil War. So the whole thing, especially now, you know, I mean, he's picked on because of his color. You know, the lunatic is put in cages. Nobody in the poor farm is considered equal to anyone else because of their circumstance. So, and then all the love between all these misfits. I think it would make a really good old time, take your family, no, not young children, but certainly middle schoolers and up. There's a lot of teaching that goes on in that movie. So that was my second one. Maybe not as good as These Is My Words would be in a movie, but there's an audience for it, I think.
I can see it.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
there's
Ron.
some really powerful, like,
themes in there.
themes. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
ideas
middle
is not the
grade
word.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There's
like
a lot in there.
wow.
There was part, if you read it in a classroom, there would be children crying. I wouldn't read it to young children, but middle
But
school.
considering, you know, some of her other books are, you know, Great Gilly Hopkins, and then what's the other one that you said?
Bridge to Terabithia.
Bridge to Terabithia. I mean,
Those are
she-
both emotional ones too,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they
you
are.
know, these are things kids are dealing with too. So she goes
Right.
after that and creates a world that they can start to process how they feel
Yeah.
about that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ronnie.
Yeah,
Really good
thank you.
And now we'll have Jen share her books that should be made into movies.
Okay, I'm being joined by Izzy, who's my senior puppy, who has a lot of feelings today. So
Aw.
let's see if I hold her, if she will stop barking at everything. You ready? Can we talk? Okay. So my two books, I want to start with War Cross by Marie Lu. This book is set in the future, and it's, if you've read Ready Player One, it's got a lot of Ready Player One vibes. We're at a point where this game, Warcross, is actually a video game, and it has become like the big thing. Everybody is super into Warcross, and it's so big that they have tournaments. It's like, you know, esports extreme. So the main character, her name is Emika, and she is she's on her own. She doesn't have a family. Like, I think her dad has passed away. Her mom is gone. So she makes her money by basically being a bounty hunter for people who have made illegal bets inside Warcross. It's illegal. She helps track them down. She gets to a point where she finds herself really broke, really in need of some trouble. She also is super good at Warcross and a little bit of a hacker. So she decides she's going to help herself out by hacking into the game and basically stealing some power-ups so she can sell them. But there's a glitch, and she's in the middle of a broadcasted game, and she gets broadcasted to the entire world. That all of a sudden everyone sees her. So she thinks, I'm gonna get arrested. I'm dead. This is it. And instead, the creator of Warcross, his name is Hideo, he comes to her and he says, listen, we're about to have the, you know, national tournament or whatever, the big game for Warcross. I think there's somebody inside who's trying to sabotage me. For every game, there's like a set number of people that are the best, and then they give 2 spots up to wild cards. So basically, it's just general fans that like apply. Hey, I want to play. He says, I'm going to give you one of the wild card spots, but you got to spy for me. So what I think this would make such a cool movie, because there's all this tech stuff. There's also a ton of alternative reality. So like they have these glasses where, you know, it's like Pokemon Go when you're playing and you can like, oh, look, Pikachu's in my house. But they wear these glasses like all the time, and they can put alternate reality like in front of your face. So like there's a total mix at this point between what's real and what's not real, and what you are sharing with the world and what you're broadcasting to the world. And then there's this video game that's totally immersive. It's like a virtual reality video game. And then, you know, there's spies and there's danger and there's a little bit of romance, and it has all of the things that I think would make a super cool movie. And it's just, you know, you can't go wrong with sci-fi that puts you inside of a game. Like, there's so much that could happen there. And then my other book is Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. And this one's cheating a little bit because if you're familiar with Neil Gaiman and his adapted things, you may be like, oh, this sounds familiar. Anansi Boys is actually a companion book to American Gods, and American Gods is a TV show. But I think it's an unpopular opinion. I like Anansi Boys better than American Gods. So I would like to see this. If you're familiar at all with American Gods, it follows basically gods from different, you know, pantheons that are inside the, you know, United States and whatever hijinks ensue. American Gods is really dark. Anansi Boys is funny. So Anansi Boys follows Charles Nancy, who is known as Fat Charlie. And he got his name Fat Charlie, despite the fact that he's not fat at all. He's actually quite fit, by his dad. His dad is Mr. Nancy, and he does appear in American Gods. Mr. Nancy is he's someone that constantly humiliates poor Fat Charlie. He's the one that named him Fat Charlie. He was a chubby kid, and he was like, oh, you're Fat Charlie. But when Mr. Nancy names something, it sticks. So even though now Charlie's an adult, he's living in London, he's away from America, he's got his own life, he's still Fat Charlie. People who meet him for the first time are like, oh, hey, Fat Charlie, even though the guy is, you know, not Fat Charlie. He doesn't like his dad. His dad has, you know, he's always just humiliating him. And like beyond the normal, like, I'm embarrassed by my dad. Yeah. So his dad humiliates him one final time, basically by dying on a karaoke stage in the middle of singing to a woman when he falls off the stage and yanks her shirt down. Humiliating. So Charlie has to go to Florida to deal with his dad's death. And while he's there in the middle of the funeral, he finds out that his dad, Mr. Nancy, was not just this embarrassing, you know, guy. He was actually a god. He was the African trickster god, Anansi. And he also finds out that he has a twin brother named Spider. And Spider got all of the magic and the god powers. And he's never known, Charlie has never known that his brother existed. So this book takes the two of them. They meet. They kind of have an extreme sibling rivalry. Spider decides he's going to basically take over Charlie's life. Charlie's fights back, so he has to go seek the help of other, you know, ancient gods, basically, to try to like get rid of Spider. But there's all of this. You have all of this myth, all of this mythology. And Nancy is the African trickster god. So there's all of that goes with it. There's all these other, particularly African myths that get put in there from the other sort of animal gods. There's Tiger is a really important character. But that's what I love about this book, is that it brings all of this mythology to forefront, and it's funny. Like some of the stuff that happens between Charlie and his brother, and, you know, as they're trying to kind of outdo each other and deal with each other, it's entertaining. And I think, obviously American Gods has done well. So, you know, you could translate these things into a movie or a TV show, but I love this one just a little bit more than American Gods. So I would love to see this made as a movie, because I think it's funny, and it would bring this character, you know, Anansi. That's something that most people, particularly in this country, we don't necessarily know of. Like if you talk about Grimm fairy tales or other, you know, even like Norse myths, you know, thanks to Thor. Okay, I'm gonna put you down. Stop, don't bark at me. You know, African myths aren't something that we necessarily know a lot about, and they're really cool. So I would love to see that. And like, I love the way that this book treats race. You meet Charlie, you don't even realize that he's black until like, you know, a fairly decent way into the book. And then you're like, oh yeah, his dad's an African god. That makes sense. But I would love to see that as a movie, just because I feel like it's it's not at the forefront, you know. It's a part of who he is, obviously, but a lot of the book ends up taking place on a Caribbean island, which has its own quirks and fun, and I just think this would make an awesome movie.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. I'd go see them. And I will go ahead and share mine. And my first one is The Coroner's Lunch, which is the first book in the Dr. Siri Paiboon series. And I think this would make a great movie because I think it has a fairly unique setting. It's set in 1970s Laos, shortly after Laos has become a communist country. And it's from the point of view of Dr. Siri, who fought with what would then have been the Laos rebels. He went to France, studied under Marxist teachers, and when Laos started to rebel against France and started to say, nope, this isn't what we want. We also don't like our king because all this money is going into this monarchy and the people are suffering. So they went to war, and he was on the side of the communists. So I think it's a very different point of view than what we usually get. I don't know anything about Laos at all. I think the setting would be great. And then Dr. Siri is the state coroner. So he doesn't have any background in this, but they choose him because he's got a doctorate degree. One of his closest friends, Civilai, is in this new Politburo, and so he becomes the state coroner. And at first things seem like they're going to go along okay, and things stay pretty quiet, and he gets a little team together. He's got his nurse, Dewey, and he's got his helper, Mr. Sung. And then they end up with the body of one of the highest politicians in the Politburo, and it's his wife. And things rapidly devolve, and he gets involved in politics, and there are shamans that come into his life. There's some mystical things going on, some hauntings. He thinks his neighbors might be spying on him. There might be a bombing in there somewhere. And so somehow Dr. Siri Paiboon needs to get to the truth of what happened to this woman, but he also needs to do it without upsetting the people in power. And that becomes very complicated. So I love the setting of these when I'm listening to them. And I just think as a movie, that setting would be so different from what we're used to. I could also see it being a great PBS masterpiece series because, it's got this different setting, and there is a whole series of these. I've listened to the first 4, and I want to say there's like 15 or more in the series now. So I could see it becoming a really great, hour and a half series. So people out there that make television or movies, Dr. Siri Paiboon, it's going to be your next great hit. And then my other one is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran. And this is nonfiction. And we did this for our book club. And again, this is one of those things we either didn't cover in my history class, or I just missed that paragraph in my history book because I didn't know anything about this. So in the 1920s, the richest people per capita in the world were the members of the Osage Indian Nation in Oklahoma, which I was like, what? And then things get crazy because the members of the Osage Nation are getting killed. There's a bombing, there's a knifing, there's poisonings, and they're dying. And then as they bring in different police to investigate this, those police investigators start dying as well. And as part of all of this, the FBI starts getting involved. And this is really early days for the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover. So you've got that whole FBI story. You have this whole mystery of what's happening to the Osage people. It's set in the 1920s. I just think this could be incredible. One of my favorite movies is The Untouchables with Sean Connery and Kevin Costner, and they are investigating taking down Al Capone. I feel like Killers of the Flower Moon could be an Untouchables movie where there's definitely action and mystery and the fact that it's based on a true story. Like, this is a mind-blowing book. If you have not read it, you really need to. I did not know anything about this. If you're interested in FBI history, if you're interested in Native American history and how they were treated, wow, this is an eye-opener. And this isn't back in the 1800s. This was 100 years ago in the 1920s. So it's an eye-opener. It's so good. I'm trying to look and see if there's anything that I missed. I'd love to say that there's, this amazing ending to it. The real life ending is a real life ending. David Grant's pretty sure he knows who committed the murders, but they ultimately are not brought to justice. So if this was made into a movie and you could kind of do that inspired by true life, that's the one thing I would want to change. I would want to change the ending so that there was more justice. But the real ending would be great too, because it would be one of those tragic endings where you look at it and go, yeah, that's real life. So those were my two that they should make them into movies, and maybe somebody's got the rights on them already and just hasn't done it yet, because I think both of them would be fabulous. So
I'm definitely going to check out that the Flower Moon one.
Yeah, it is really good. And I'm not normally a nonfiction reader, and thankful for book clubs, because book clubs make me read outside what I would normally read.
Yes, they do.
And so usually every year we have one or two nonfiction, and surprisingly, it's usually the nonfiction books that tend to stick with me longer. Like, there's something about it being real and going, wow, real life is pretty incredible, which is why I
never knew that
to escape into.
Right. Yeah.
I never heard of that either, because I read that one too.
Yeah.
That part of history, never knew that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that wasn't in my history book.
No.
And I feel like if you could get kids, like if you could tell them this story, like suddenly history would come alive, because then it's not just, oh, here's some facts and then this battle happened and then this happened. I think they would be invested in the lives of the Osage and what happened to them. But all right. Well, now we got a whole list for, producers to get working on, snap, so we can see whether they do a good job or not, and then we can dissect it later. And thank you to all of you for sharing your books that you want to see as movies. Thank you to those of you that listened. And next time, we are going to be discussing great graphic novels. So make sure to tune in for that one. Even if you aren't a graphic novel reader, you might be surprised at all the different things that graphic novels talk about these days, and the different genres that they cover, and the different art forms that are used in them. So make sure to tune in for that one. And we hope you have great weeks. Bye.